They talk about the boom, but do they mention the bust? The headlines scream luxury, but the numbers don't lie. It's time to look the market straight in the eye. Welcome to the Miami Condo Exchange, where we break down the price, the scope, and the range. With Peter Zalewski, the authority here, making the complex simple, making the murky clear. From the buy-side pressure to the sell-side heat, we're tracking every move on the concrete street. We got the data, the stats, the metrics you need. Beyond the flash and the glamour, we're planting the seed of truth. We analyze the trends, we map out the spread. Is it vintage charm or a money pit trap? We're looking at the analytics, closing the gap. Past performance, present shock, future prediction. Separating hard reality from the friction of fiction. No sugarcoating, no fluff, no disguise. Just the raw condo numbers right before your eyes. South Florida is shifting, the tides start to turn. If you don't know the math, you're gonna get burned. Yeah, this is the Miami Condo Exchange. Welcome to the Miami Condo Exchange, where we break down the price, the scope, and the range. With Peter Zalewski, keeping it real, digging deep in the dirt of every single deal. From the buy-side pressure to the sell-side heat, the only podcast you need on the Miami street. Hey. Real numbers, real talk. The hyperbole stops here. This is the Miami Condo Exchange, y'all.
Happy New Year, Miami. It's December the 31st, 2025. This is the last podcast I'm going to be recording before we get into 2026. This is the Miami Condo Exchange. This is a podcast, roughly half an hour to an hour. We'll kind of see how it goes. That's going to be all about data. It's going to be metrics. It's going to be about trends. We're going to cut through all of the noise out there, all of the marketing, and we're going to give you some straight talk about what's going on statistically in the Tri-County, South Florida area of Miami-Dade, Broward, Palm Beach County. I'm Peter Zalewski. I am a condo consultant. I'm an expert witness. I'm also the founder of the Miami Condo Investing Club. Some of you might be watching this podcast and say, December 31st, that's a Wednesday, although this podcast is supposed to come out on Tuesday. And I will tell you, you're 100% right. You are right. I should have done this podcast on Tuesday, but we had some issues that came up, and as a result, we pushed everything off a day. This is the last of the holiday season, and as a result, we thought it was important to come forward and do this podcast, despite the fact that we missed a day because of other issues. But because you're watching this live, you are in for a fantastic overview of what's going on in the South Florida condo market. We're going to be talking about a whole variety of things today, including, most importantly, we are going to get a one-year look back at what happened on the South Florida Condo Association Financial Cliff Index. We're going to look at the vintage market. Vintage market is those condos that are at least 30 years old or older. Those are the ones that are under the greatest scrutiny of all because of the Surfside condo collapse back in June of 2021, where nearly 100 people died. A $1 billion settlement was paid out to the families of the victims. And as a result, the insurance industry, they lobbied the legislature. Legislature put in place a whole variety of different mandates, including inspections being done of all the condo associations in Florida. Keep in mind, there's somewhere in the vicinity of 28,250 condo associations with about 1.2 million units throughout the whole land area of Florida, and roughly about 13,000 associations with about 610,000 units are in the Tri-County, South Florida region of Miami-Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach County. And some of these mandates that came down as a result of the legislature Every 10 years, a condo association is required now to do something called a structural integrity reserve study. That's done at year 10. And when a building's coming up on its 30-year anniversary, they're required to do what's called a milestone inspection. That is really a roll up the sleeves, deep dive into what is the condition of the building. Both of these studies, the structural integrity reserve study, which is done every 10 years, as well as the milestone inspection, they require a licensed architect or a licensed engineer to go in there, assess it, come up with a short list as to what needs to be done, what the lifespan is, whether it's a roof, the structure, anything else, the mechanical, electrical, the plumbing. They then turn it over to the finance people. Finance people will come out with an estimate, and the estimate that comes up with, this is what the condo association now needs to adopt, and more importantly, they need to begin funding. Tomorrow, on January the 1st of 2026, these condo associations are going to be required to start collecting reserves to go ahead and put in a rainy day fund to go ahead and pay for all the work that's been identified by the experts, which are licensed architects or licensed engineers. And what does that mean? That means maintenance fees are up. That means special assessments are coming. And that means insurance continue to become more and more pricey, making condo living in South Florida, and including the entire state of Florida, making it extremely challenging for many. And what's happening as a result of this and as a result of the deadline that kicks in tomorrow? Well, you're seeing a lot of people head for the exits. A lot of people are trying to get out simply because they can't afford it. They're not going to be able to afford these special assessments. They're not going to be able to afford the maintenance fees, and they're hoping to be able to exit. The problem is you got too many units on the market, not enough transactions, and the job market is going sideways. Hence, the interest rate cuts that have been coming from the Federal Reserve. Jerome Powell, the chairman of the Federal Reserve, he's cut interest rates 3 times since September. There's expectations on Wall Street that we could see another 2 or 3 interest rate cuts. Why? Because of job cuts. We're in what the Wall Street economists and experts are calling a low hire, low fire market. Business owners aren't necessarily sure what the future is going to be. Why? Because tariffs are on one day, then they're off, then they're on, then they're off, on. How do you make any kind of predictions for that? So what companies are doing is they're simply sitting back. They're trying to absorb the tariffs. They're trying to pass on what they can in terms of tariffs to the end users. And what that's doing is it's increasing affordability, or making it more difficult for affordability and making it effectively everything unaffordable. And what do we have pegged to that? We have the condo association fees because of Surfside. So as a result of that, we find ourselves in a heck of a pickle as we get into 2026. But we anticipated a lot of this. Therefore, back in June of 2024, we came out and we called the Great Florida Condo Association Financial Cliff for 2025. And lo and behold, it is hitting, it is underway, and we're starting to see people unload, including in the popular Brickell Avenue area of Greater Downtown Miami. I did a walking tour on Saturdays. And by the way, I do tours every Saturday, do it from 10 o'clock to about 1 o'clock. If you want more information on tours, go to miamicondo.club, which is my website. Up at the top, you'll see tours, or you can go directly to the, the payment company. It's called, that website is miamicondoclub.eventbrite.com. And basically what we do on these tours, we go ahead, we analyze an overall market. We then give you a list of all the condo buildings that exist within a particular area. We walk the area, typically about 4 miles or so. It takes about 3 hours to do it at a moderate pace. And I teach you how to analyze condo buildings, because I'm a big believer that you find the buildings that make sense. And then once you have the buildings that make sense, you then can work your way in and focus on the units in terms of pricing. Too many people go out there and they chase a condo. They get this condo, that condo, that condo, this condo. They finally get it under contract. They get all the paperwork. They start going through it and they figure, oh no, this building's not going to work for me. So we say do it the opposite way. Find the buildings that make sense. Once you front load it, then when a unit becomes available, you can move on it. You'll have a good idea what pricing is, and chances are you're probably going to have a little bit better of an outcome as it all plays out. So that's what we're recommending. And doing my tour last Saturday, we did the Brickell Avenue area. What we found is there's about 80 condo projects in that area, which would be the Miami River South to the Eddie Rickenbacker Causeway. It'll be Biscayne Bay West to Interstate 95. About 80 condo projects there. An additional 20 new condo projects coming. And what we found is 20 condo projects. The pricing today is below what the units traded for in the same projects back in the summer buying season, which went from May through October. So we have a little bit of a disconnect here. We have people trying to get out. They're trying to unload some of the discounts on some of these buildings or these projects where the pricing is now below, the asking price is below what transacted during the summer buying season. What's going on with them? Well, many of them are starting to come to the reality is that they might be a little bit jammed up, and some of them are trying to head for the exits. They want to get out first. They're hoping they can find a buyer to come in, take them out of their misery. and ultimately call it a day. So my tip to you, if you are looking for a condo, it can make sense as long as you use the fundamentals. Some fundamentals you can rely on. Go ahead and use something called the 1% rule. Everybody in the real estate industry hates it if they're on the sell side. 1% rule is real simple. Look it up on Investopedia. Look it up anywhere. Basically, it says whatever your rent is, it represents 1% of your monthly, 1%. 1 month of rent represents 1% of the value. For instance, $1,000 a month in rent means the place is worth $100,000. $10,000 a month rent means the place is worth $1 million. So if you want to play in this market and you're not sure about catching a falling knife, which is a cliche, go ahead and use the 1% rule. This is a rule used by hard money lenders. This is used by private lenders. They want to make sure that they have some wiggle room in case somebody goes bad on the loan. This is the way you can do it. Another way you can do it is you can basically try to calculate the rent, calculate what the property taxes are, as well as the maintenance fees annually, run it through. You'll get a total. You take the gross rent, you'll minus the property taxes, you'll minus the maintenance fees. You'll come out with a number, divide that in your purchase price, and it'll give you a return. To be investable, it should be 4% or greater. If it is 8% or more, that is what they call a pound the table, and rush in and hurry up and do your due diligence, because chances are you're probably going to do pretty well. But what we're finding in many condos in all throughout South Florida, including in the Brickell Avenue area, we're finding cap rates of 0.8%, not even 1%, not even 1%, at a time when inflation is 3% and rising, at a time when a CD will pay you north of 4%, at a time when the Dow Jones Industrial Average was up 10% this year, at a time when the NASDAQ was up 20%. Condos are paying less than 1%. So therein lies the problem. Buyers are saying, I got no reason to get off my couch and run in. And sellers are saying, oh my God, I can't afford it because of all the costs going up. So what is that doing? That's creating all kinds of drama. So it's a long history to sort of get us to where we're going with this Miami Condo Exchange, which again is about data, metrics, and trends. What we're going to be talking about today is the vintage condos. These are the ones that are at least 30 years old. These are the ones that have gone through their special assessments and or are getting the special assessment. They're the ones that have the much more space. They tend to be in better locations, but the problem is they're older, and therefore the maintenance fees are probably going to be a little bit higher because they don't have the latest technology, just like an old car versus a new car in terms of, what it costs to sort of maintain. So we're going to get into that, and we're going to refer to our Condo Cliff Index. This is something we launched on January the 1st of 2025 in anticipation of what ultimately is here. And what we've been doing is every week, every Tuesday, we've been pulling the data. We're looking at active listings and we're looking at pending sales. And we're coming up with a point, a metric to be able to gauge the market. So we look at South Florida. And South Florida is made up Miami-Dade, Broward, Palm Beach County. We then look at Miami-Dade County. We look at Broward County. We look at Palm Beach County. Then we add an additional 19 markets going from Coconut Grove, as well as Coral Gables, all the way up the coast into West Palm Beach and Palm Beach Island, which we put together as one. If you don't know, Palm Beach Island is where Mar-a-Lago is. That is where President Trump has his estate. So we're tracking all of this market, and we're looking at it week over week over week to give us, as well as you, some perspective as to what's going on. So we got the vintage side, and then we got the overall side. Today, we're going to be talking about the vintage side. So what did we find in the course of 52 weeks of having this index, this South Florida Vintage Condo Association Financial Cliff Index? What we found for these buildings is ultimately the index has gone down 4.33% since January the 1st. What does it mean in terms of real numbers? Well, if you look at the number of listings year to date, the listings have gone up about 4%, and the number of pending sales have actually fallen. Typically, what you want to see is you want to see pending sales go up and you want to see listings fall, and therefore you'll have a stronger market. If listings go up and pending sales fall, you're going to have a weaker market. If you're a buyer, you want a weaker market, more negotiating power. If you're a seller, you want a stronger market. Therefore, you have more negotiating power as buyers start to come in. So this is kind of the way it's played out. But what we saw, again, over the course of a year, 4.33% drop in the index. Back on January the 1st of 2025, when we first launched the index for South Florida, what we had coming in terms of a baseline was the index came in at 6.87. Where did we end the year as of this week? Because remember, we do it every Tuesday. We came in at 6.57.